Hello and welcome back to our penultimate session of the day, where it's one of those slightly uncomfortable sessions where we're going to have to hold the mirror up, which I must admit I'm kind of looking forward to after everything we've done today. So, thank you for joining us. Please do jump straight into the chat. Let us know where you're joining from, what you're looking to get out of this session, and what you've got most use out of so far today. Please do stay active in the chat throughout the session. Thank you to our speaker, Leah, all the other speakers today, yourselves, and our event sponsors, L&D Free Spirits, Little Man Project, and Evolve L&D. Without further ado, I'm going to shut up, get out of the way, and hand over the reins. Leah, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Tom, and so great to see you all here. Please feel free to say hi in the chat so I know who's here. If there's anyone I know, give me a wave. What we're going to talk about today, as Tom said, I guess is slightly uncomfortable because a lot of L&D conferencing, not this one in particular, but most of the ones I've attended or seen, are very, pat each other on the shoulder and telling each other the same things over and over again. Now, why that bothers me and why we're talking about this today is because I feel like we can do better. And my hope is that with these very few minutes that I have with you today, you will start thinking about tiny things that you can start doing right now that will progressively move you closer to what it is that you truly believe should be happening in L&D. So, what I want you to do first is actually go in the chat and tell me, why did you decide to join today? What are you hoping this will give you? Is there anything specific? Do you hope that you will do something different, learn something perhaps, understand something better? And if anyone's looking at this after the fact, please also stop to think about this. I'm just going to be uncomfortably quiet while you tell me why you're here. Okay, different perspective, yeah. Well, hopefully you will feel, sufficiently challenged when we're done here. Let's change the status quo, yeah. That's good. That's a good point. That you're not always the best learner. Yeah, no, I guess not. But are you the best teacher or the best designer? Well, the reason I want you to think about this is because a lot of times when we get together like this for different types of conferences, etc., we don't have a clear idea of what we want to achieve by spending our time like that. And I think that's dangerous because we don't have a lot of time, especially not for our own personal development. And so doing things without knowing what we want to get out of it, I think is dangerous and a waste of time potentially. So I am hoping that you have found some sort of why that explains why you want to be here with me today. Because here's the thing with the hypocrisy, right? We are all doing it. And it's not just people in L&D, right? I think humanity in itself is currently, or perhaps has always been, extremely hypocritical. And here are some good examples. So one example would be, we want to save the climate, but then we also want to take that weekend trip by airplane. And so we do. Or we know fast fashion is, super duper bad. And yet, we bought that cute top. Or we know what good learning looks like. But that's not what we are building. Does anyone recognize themselves in any of these? Because I believe I do all of them at some point. I know what I should be doing and what I know is right and correct, but then that is not necessarily what I'm doing. And that leads us to the hypocrisy of L&D. So we are not practicing what we preach. If you have any good examples of some hypocrisy you've seen, I'd love for you to share them with me. Emily, yeah, the H&M bit, yeah, dangerous stuff. But I thought, can you guys find the emoji button, please, and just send me a random emoji so I know that you've seen it. Okay, good. So I am going to name something that I think we have a consensus of, and I want you to use the proper emoji to answer that statement. Are you ready? All right. So let's start with consuming information is not learning. Do you agree? All right, I'm going to go for another one. Do you agree lecturing is not teaching? I really hope you do, otherwise I'm going to get really worried. How about this one? A PowerPoint should not be converted into quick e-learning. Could be, but shouldn't, right? Or how about this one? Behavioral change takes more than training. Gonna sip some tea while I while I let that sink in. Or once is not enough for long-term learning. We know this, right? It should be distributed, usually isn't. So technically, I feel like the more you know, the more stuff there is for us to ignore. Which is, bad. And I was hoping that you would share with me in the chat, perhaps, a really bad example that you've seen recently of a learning initiative or activity that you found, extra cringeworthy or really depressing, considering that we should know and do better. It could be something you built yourself if you want to be really honest with yourself. I recently took a job where I basically helped to create quizzes. Anyone who knows me knows I don't actually believe in quizzes as a form of knowledge check. And yet I was in a situation where I didn't have a lot of work and they asked me to do it. And I said yes. I also told them, of course, that it's not actually a measurement for real learning, but still. Ugh. 6-hour Zoom workshop. Ugh. Now that is ghastly. And yes, we know better, right? This is one of the things we know, right, that our attention span is limited. At best, we're talking 20 minutes, but we usually don't even have 20 minutes, right? And yet we persist with having all of these hours-long activities without breaks. Like, why would anyone force people to sit down for 2 hours without a break? We know better. We know not to lecture. We know not to, kill people with slides. And yet we do. All legislation. Oh dear, that is a lot of legislation. Video guides with no written alternative because the creator was in love with creating video content. Ah, yes, okay. That is traumatic, guys. That is really, really traumatic. Let me tell you what I keep seeing. Here's a quick rundown. I keep seeing info dumps, despite the fact that we all know they're absolutely useless. I also see us not doing needs analysis, meaning that most of the things we build, we don't even know if they are needed or if they, will meet a mark. There is no mark. We don't know anything. We're just building stuff. And it is frustrating me to no end. And yes, sometimes I am guilty of this myself. Someone comes, tells me, "Hi, Linnea, you have your own business. I want you to build this for me." And I feel like I should say yes. I do try to tell them that they shouldn't do that, but I might still take the job. No measurable goals. And this one is tied to the needs analysis, of course, right? But not just that. The lack of pedagogical thought. Nobody thought, what would be the best way to convey this? How could you learn this? What would you need in order to process this information, try stuff, etc.? The text-heavy slides. You've seen them, you know them. The passive learning, right? So whether it's sitting in front of a screen looking at endless amounts of videos, or it's sitting in a classroom listening to someone yammer on, there is just so much focus on passive learning. It's also often detached from reality, meaning nobody can tell us when this applies, how this is supposed to be used. And it's depressing, right? I told a client once I could do that, but what they wanted, but it would be shit. Yes, I say that a lot, actually. I'm like, yes, you can have that, but also why? We also do a lot of what I want to call one-hit wonders, which means, it's a hit it and quit it kind of situation, where we are basically creating a one-off training that we will never revisit, that is not, connected to anything else happening in the business, and then we expect someone to remember that and do something with it, which is, it's not going to happen. We know that. We know better. All right, we have meaningless images. This is a pet peeve of mine, and I'm going to just stop there before I go crazy. Quizzes, as I mentioned, we know that they don't measure actual learning outcomes, yet we persist in putting quizzes everywhere. And then lack of greater picture. Everything is not necessarily put into the concept of, how is this going to be used? How is it tied to business goals? How is it tied to the future of work? It's just random pieces of training just floating around in the universe. So I guess what we need to ask ourselves next, and please contribute in the chat if you have an idea of what is stopping you from practicing what you preach, or doing what you believe is the right kind of training. I will tell you what mine are in a bit, but I really want to know yours. So, or is it a who? It could be, right? And the who could be yourself sometimes, but it could also be a manager, it could be a client in my perspective, since I have my own company. It could be colleagues, it could be subject matter experts. The learners themselves. Yes, Joe, thank you. I think that's really relevant, because we are really in a situation where the learners, want to be fed, if you will, right? Spoon-fed information. And when you ask them to work and think and reflect, they look like you betrayed them almost. Like, why? Why are you doing this to me? So let's see. Yes, as a freelancer, you are very low on wiggle room, as you call it, and I absolutely feel this myself as someone who has my own company. I do have to work within the constraints of who my client is, what they understand, etc. And there is a balance between, informing them and talking about what good learning is, and then not losing your clients. So yes, definitely. Um, Budget constraints, absolutely. Thank you for saying brand guidelines, Christina, because that's actually on my list. Because this, once again, it drives me crazy. All right, so here are some of mine. I'm going to go through them quickly. Lack of demand. Nobody's asking for learning that actually gives results, which means that I am trying to sell them something they don't feel like they need. The budget, as you've mentioned. A very low understanding from the organizational standpoint, from scheduling, etc., on how learning works. So, like when I want to do distributed learning, people just find that I am being inconvenient, and that is a scheduling nightmare. The band-aid approach, right? We just want some training because we have this internal problem and now we need to fix it, so we want the band-aid, that is training. Closely related to this, of course, check the box learning. You know it, you've seen it, you've taken it, and everyone hates it. And yet we keep building it. And for a freelancer, sometimes it's really hard to get out of having to build a lot of check the box learning, because that is what people are willing to pay for, because they have to have it, right? It's the law or something. Time, of course. Templates, or as you said, brand guidelines. Why? Why are we saying that? Well, it has to look like this. It has to be like this. It has to follow this flow. It has to... No, it doesn't. It has to give results. That's what I think. It has to solve a real problem. It has to be meaningful. It has to be helpful. I don't think it needs to follow brand guidelines and whatever templates you've created. And then there's technical constraints, right? And this can be anything from the authoring tool or editing tools that you have, your LMS, the units or things that your participants can take the training on, etc. So, or what you have in physical classrooms. I know when I was a classroom trainer back in the day, I would actually travel with USB audio equipment because I knew that there would not be speakers in all classrooms, even though it was specified that there should be. I would travel with my own USB speakers, which is madness. But I did because, yeah, that's the only way. And then, of course, it's the low or no willingness to change. And so I'm gonna give you like a quick story. This is a real story from my life. So I was contacted by an organization. They have a lot of internal trainers that are usually, in the actual business, and then they lift them out of the business to do classroom training. And they contacted me because they wanted a sort of train the trainer on pedagogy, classroom management, helping people learn, learning disabilities, all sorts of things like that. They weren't very specific, but after some talk, we did manage to nail it down somewhat. And technically, what they said that they wanted was a 2-day classroom training at a hotel with a big conference room. They would fly all their staff there to central Sweden and have the training there. 2 days, one off, or a one-hit wonder, as I like to call it. And so I counted. I said, you know what? Why don't we do this blended? And I gave them a pitch that was basically, it starts with a really short video conference meeting where we just get started. They do some reflective questions and some research on their own, basically reflecting on their practice in the classroom. Then we do another web session. After that, they have some more reflection questions. We meet up for one day at a conference center. They get an assignment after that. They do it. They send it in. And then about 3 months after the classroom event, we have a sort of, tie the ribbon web event. And they said no, because, well, you can guess if you want to. Maybe you already know why. It would be a scheduling nightmare, because since they take people out of work to do training, the entire model is based on one day, right? You can't have someone removed from their work for half a day or an hour or 2 hours or, 2 hours over a week. So for them, that would have been new and strange. And they preferred to just have the 2 hour or 2 day event. And so I told them very honestly, like, we can do that. I mean, you're the client, you pay, you can have whatever you want technically, as long as it's legal, but it's not going to have a positive effect on anything. You're not going to be able to see change. You're not going to be able to experience anything getting better. And the answer I got was, it's okay. We just want them to feel like we gave them something. And you can react with a proper emoji at this point if you want to. I didn't get the job, by the way. Someone who happily did 2 hours of classroom training without complaining got the job. Because the only way I agreed to do it classroom was to cut down on the amount of content so that we could focus on a small amount of content but do it well. And they said, no, we really want to stuff them full of content for 2 days. And we'll find and pay someone else to do it. And that is my life. Freelancing, so fun. No, but I mean, it's the same internally, right? When I used to work at an L&D department, it was the same. So, yeah. Yes, Gavin, my integrity costs me a lot of work, actually. I'm not sure it's the best business strategy. Now, we only have about 7 minutes left, which is not a lot of time, but I want to get really uncomfortable and ask you, are we doing it right now? Are we doing something we know isn't going to change anything? Have I come here on my soapbox preaching about living our values and doing things we know work, and then doing it at a conference where we might just forget everything we just heard and go back to work because emails or something? Ensue uncomfortable silence. Now, as learning conferences go, this is actually a really good one. It has air between the sessions. The sessions are not too long, they're not too many. A lot of the sessions have been quite interactive and fun, compared to a lot of other learning conferences I go to, where it's back to back, no air, PowerPoint festival, and people just talking, right, to people. And what the thing to me, right, is that I know we can do better when it comes to everything, when it comes to how we're building training, whether it's classroom, e-learning, blended, whatever it is. I know we can do better, and it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be big or advanced things. Same with conferences. I know we could make learning conferences all over the world so much better by tweaking a few things. Not a lot of things necessarily, but a few things. Emily, that's amazing. Yes, I really do think it's important to plan time for reflection, for thinking about what you've done and how you could have done it better, and for learning things for yourself, right? I mean, I find that sometimes the reason I'm not building better things is because I don't have time to truly figure out how to do the new thing. Nobody's willing to pay for that time, whether it's if you as an employee or as a consultant or freelancer, right? Nobody's willing to pay me for the time it takes to try new stuff. And yes, we need to feel empowered to push back. I agree, and that is sort of actually where I want to end this. So we need to become really uncomfortable people. I feel like I've been quite light in this session, but what I'm talking about is being that awkward person who keeps asking the why questions, who keeps saying, but that won't have an effect, will it? Who keeps saying, well, I don't see why we should do it at all if we're not going to do it properly. The person who says, is training really the answer? Because all problems cannot be solved with training, right? So why, once again, why do we want training? So we need to be comfortable being really, really uncomfortable because it's not fun, right? It's not fun being that person speaking the truth. It's clearly not good for business, as you've seen in my example sometimes. And it's not necessarily even good for your short-term career development. I do think it's good for your conscience and your soul and for the business as a whole, for the industry. And the more people who stand up to do it, the less uncomfortable it will be because we won't be doing it alone. Because the only way out is through. So, defiant and challenging is what I want you to be. I want you to communicate what learning is and what it isn't. And when training is a good idea and when training is not a good idea. What's training for? What can learning do and what can learning not do, especially not on its own? And we need to say no. We need to say no and then offer options. So say, no, we're not going to build you an e-learning about this, but we will help you to create a kick-ass work aid. Or, no, we're not going to create training on this, but we will help you train really good super users. So we need to be constructive to some extent, right? We can't just say no because that's not going to work. But saying no is a really good thing. So I have 2 minutes left, and what I want you to do with these 2 minutes is to think of one thing that you want to do differently tomorrow. And if you're comfortable sharing it, please put it in the chat. Yes, Joe, more challenge. Love that. But what do you mean with three jokers a year? I'm not sure I understand that concept. Yes, Gavin, that's amazing. Keep pushing for impactful solution. Yeah, exactly. That's great. So while I see your amazing comments, I am just quickly also going to share some contact information with you. The QR code will take you to my LinkedIn. I'd love to connect. And you could also contact me. And if you want a really inconvenient consultant or freelancer who can help you build training and become a better training department, you know where to find me. I promise I will be as much of a pain in the ass as I can. Oh, it's okay. The Joker is a right to play a card that means you can halt the project. I like that. I've never heard that word before, but I love it. Yeah, so it's like a get out of jail free card, basically. I don't want to do this. That's amazing.
Lovely stuff.
Thank you.
Well, we are at time. I want to say thank you so much. That was a really fantastic and I think provocative session that should get us all thinking, which is the whole point of this. And I would encourage you, there's 30 minutes between all the sessions today. That was deliberately done based on feedback from last time about getting some more time in there. So make use of it. I mean, I'm sure in fairness, we've probably all got things we need to do, but try and at least take 5 minutes of those 30 to have a little think about this and how you can put it all into action. But thank you so much for being so engaged throughout this and getting involved in the chat. Thank you for the talk there. Thank you to everyone involved. And in just half an hour, we will be going into our very last session of the last event for this year, to be honest. And it'll be the ultimate design tactic to elevate your training to the next level with Joe Cook. This is another one where we're going to jump into Google Chat to do it. So please don't be alarmed when you see something different when you sign in. I hope to see all of you there in 28 minutes now. And thank you all once again there. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you. Bye.